What makes life worth living? What's the point of living if you don't actually do it? And again, how can we best deal with fear, loneliness, death? These are some of the big questions that existential therapy addresses. It does not impose itself to find simple or pre-packaged answers, but invites us to look inside ourselves, our choices, our experiences, and become increasingly aware and masters of our existence. It draws inspiration from existentialist philosophy and developed as a therapeutic approach in the 20th century thanks to figures such as Viktor Frankl, Irvin Yalom, and Rollo May. This approach combines the principles of philosophy with practical application to psychology, placing freedom, personal responsibility, and the search for meaning in life at its core. Frankl, in particular, made a notable contribution with his logotherapy, born from his experience in concentration camps, where he explored how human beings can find meaning even in the most extreme situations. Our goal in this video is to explain what it really means to take care of yourself through the lens of existential therapy. We do not want to replace the work of a qualified therapist in any way, but to offer a starting point to reflect on the big questions and understand how to address them in everyday life. We hope to stimulate deep reflections that can inspire new, personal, and functional perspectives. Existential therapy is based on a fundamental principle: existence precedes essence. This means that no one is defined by pre-established roles, labels, or patterns imposed by society. One's essence is not something static or fixed, but is built day after day through choices, experiences, and actions. It is an invitation to take charge of one's life, to be free and responsible for the meaning one decides to give it. It is important to distinguish it from existential philosophy, from which it draws inspiration. This philosophy, represented by thinkers such as Martin Heidegger, Søren Kierkegaard, and Jean-Paul Sartre, focuses on the great questions of the human being. Who are we? What is the meaning of life? How to face death and freedom? Existential therapy, on the other hand, takes these concepts and applies them to everyday life, helping one to confront fears, uncertainties, and the desire to find personal meaning. Another fundamental pillar is phenomenology, which is intertwined with existential therapy and enhances its approach. This teaches us to observe the experience as it is, without filters or preconceptions. It is like looking at an apple. Before calling it by a name or attributing a meaning to it, there is the color, the shape, the scent, the tactile sensation. Phenomenology helps us to remain anchored in the present moment, to grasp reality for what it is, and existential therapy uses this perspective to bring awareness to life experiences. Therefore, existential philosophy and phenomenology are the roots of this therapeutic perspective. Direct experience is at the center, what is lived in the here and now, even before attributing meanings or categories to it. Let's think, for example, of a red fruit. Before defining it as an apple, we perceive the color, the scent, the tactile sensation of its surface. It is this primary experience that represents authentic reality, before it is mediated by language or conventions. This approach has profound implications in therapy. Often, patients confuse the label with the emotion itself. For example, the word sadness is not the same as the emotion experienced. The term is only an attempt to describe a lump in the throat, a weight on the chest, or tears that come to the surface. Being aware of this distinction allows you to recognize what you feel without getting lost in abstractions. Heidegger emphasized how the human being cannot be reduced to an object among objects. The individual is a being for itself, capable of reflecting on its own existence, imagining the future, and taking significant action. In therapy, this means helping to recognize and value one's subjectivity. If the topic interests you, a small gesture like subscribing to the channel or a like will allow us to carry on projects like this. Thank you for your fundamental support. According to Irvin Yalom, there are 4 fundamental themes that characterize the human condition and that every individual, sooner or later, finds himself having to face. These themes, called the 4 existential concerns, are not problems to be solved, but inevitable aspects of existence that push us to reflect, to choose, and to give an authentic meaning to our lives. Now we analyze them one by one to understand how they can help us live with greater awareness and intention day by day. Let's start with the first theme, freedom. When we talk about freedom, we often associate it with a universal right, something to be conquered and protected. The freedom to express one's ideas, to choose an education, to protest against injustice. In this sense, freedom can vary from person to person, according to social, cultural, or personal circumstances. This proposes to look beyond this common definition, exploring an even deeper and more radical idea of freedom. According to the existential perspective, it is not only the absence of external constraints, but an intrinsic and universal capacity, that of choosing and acting, even in the most difficult contexts. Even in situations apparently with no way out, there is always a margin of possibility. Viktor Frankl, a concentration camp survivor, is an example. Even in the most extreme suffering, he found the freedom to choose his own attitude toward what he was experiencing. Feeling and living free, however, brings with it an enormous weight, responsibility. Every choice, every action, or even every omission is largely the result of one's own will. This means that the consequences of choices fall on one's shoulders, generating a sense of responsibility that can be disorienting or overwhelming. Kierkegaard describes this feeling as anguish, a sort of fear mixed with enchantment at the vastness of the possibilities that freedom offers. Sartre, on the other hand, describes the experience of walking on the edge of a precipice. Not only is there a fear of accidentally slipping, but there is also a fear of being so free that one could decide to jump. Existential freedom also involves the creation of personal values and meanings. There are no predefined rules that say what is right or wrong. It is up to the individual, through his choices, to build his own system of values. This responsibility can generate anxiety, but it is also a unique opportunity to live authentically, defining what really matters. Sometimes, the weight of freedom can seem unbearable, so much so that we try to avoid it. This can happen when we take refuge in external explanations that reduce our responsibility. An example is someone who clings to medical diagnoses as the only explanation for their discomfort, hoping that these can provide definitive answers. While such diagnoses may offer initial relief, they can limit one's perception of one's capacity to act and change. One can become passive, waiting for solutions from outside rather than recognizing the possibilities for transformation that are always available. Existential therapy works precisely on this aspect, helping people recognize their freedom even when it seems hidden. By collaborating with the therapist, you explore possible choices, you face the anxieties related to responsibility, and you learn to live a life that reflects your authentic values. It is not a simple process because it requires accepting the weight of your decisions, but it is a path that allows you to discover a deep and personal freedom. Existential freedom is therefore not just an abstract concept, but an invitation to look at one's own choices with awareness and to use them to build an authentic existence and realize the life one decides to live. Now let's move on to the second topic, the meaning of life. Every person wants their life to have a value, a purpose, an ultimate meaning that goes beyond simple daily living. Yet, the world as it is does not provide ready-made answers. There is no written script or universal guide that tells you how to live. This condition, which many existentialist thinkers call the absurd, can generate anxiety and disorientation, pushing us to seek solutions to fill this void. In contemporary societies, especially Western ones, the meaning of life is often reduced to the achievement of material goals. Culture offers ready-made scripts, earning money, owning luxury items, wearing designer clothes, buying the latest technology. Having a certain symbolic status seems to translate into personal value. Those who are economically successful are considered worthy. Those who fail to keep up risk being ignored, judged, or excluded. But these sources of meaning often prove superficial, incapable of truly responding to the hunger for meaning that everyone carries within themselves. Another way many people search for meaning is by adhering to predefined ideologies or belief systems. These are taken as guides for life, often without question. Belonging to a social, cultural, or religious group can provide a sense of belonging and value, but it can also become a refugee from addressing deeper questions. Accepting values and beliefs without analyzing their authenticity can lead to an anesthetized existence, where one simply follows the rules of the group without ever asking whether those values truly reflect who one is. This process can also have a dark side. When people identify completely with one worldview, they tend to see those who hold different beliefs as threatening. Defending one's values becomes a necessity, to the point of triggering conflicts and tensions. In addition, modern culture offers endless distractions to avoid grappling with the problem of meaning. Video games, movies, television shows, social media all help keep the mind occupied and avoid confronting uncomfortable questions. These distractions provide a kind of temporary relief, but they prevent us from looking within ourselves to find meaningful meaning. An authentic existence, on the other hand, requires facing these questions directly, without taking refuge in distractions or superficial beliefs. Meaning, according to existential therapy, is not something that is already ready, but something that is built through conscious choices and reflections. An existential therapist works with clients to help them identify sources of meaning that do not truly reflect who they are, and guides them toward discovering values and purposes that are authentic and personal. Living meaningfully doesn't mean having all the answers, but having the courage to ask the right questions. It means valuing your choices and the person you choose to be. So the question is not so much, what is the meaning of life? But what meaning do you want to create in your life? It's time for the third theme, existential isolation. Existential isolation goes far beyond simple physical detachment from others. It is an intrinsic condition of the human being, living in a unique interior space made of thoughts, emotions, and intentions that no one else can experience exactly as we do. This space, which we occupy in the first person, is accessible only to ourselves. While we are irremediably distinct, our existence is also deeply intertwined with that of others. For example, our bodies, which we perceive as our own, are seen by others in ways that we cannot directly experience. Think about the face. It is an essential part of us, but we never see it in its natural context, while the people around us constantly observe it. This intertwining of the self and the other can lead us to complex experiences, such as the sense of being observed, which changes the way we perceive ourselves. A common example is when you think you are alone in a room and act without caring how you appear to others. Then, discovering that you are being watched, you experience an immediate self-awareness, sometimes accompanied by feelings of embarrassment or shame. This is meant to highlight how much people's perception influences our self-understanding and how the tension between being unique and relating to others is a constant in life. Yet this awareness of existential isolation can generate anxiety and lead to inauthentic ways of responding. Sartre described two common strategies for dealing with this separation. The first is the masochistic style. This strategy consists of giving up one's individuality by merging with another person. Those who adopt this approach rely on the other to define who they are, what to do, and even what to think. It is a form of self-denial, in which one sacrifices one's freedom to find security in belonging. The second, the sadistic style, instead, consists in denying the identity of the other, treating him as an object to be controlled or manipulated. In this case, the illusion of dominating the other serves to mask one's own sense of isolation and impotence. Unfortunately, this strategy prevents the establishment of authentic relationships, transforming people into tools rather than precious human beings with whom to share experiences. According to Yalom, these two approaches represent two sides of the same coin. Both seek to escape the burden of existential isolation, but they do so at the cost of their own authenticity or that of the other. Existential therapy invites us to find a balance between the need for differentiation and the desire for connection. Accepting that existential isolation is an inevitable part of the human condition allows us to build valuable relationships. The question to ask here is not, how can I avoid isolation, but how can I fully live my uniqueness and connect with others authentically? Now let's move on to the fourth theme, death. We are, as far as we know, the only species capable of thinking symbolically and imagining the future. This capacity for abstraction allows us to live in temporal simultaneity, the remembered past, the lived present, and the anticipated future. Yet this same awareness brings with it an inescapable truth. Death is a certainty we cannot avoid. The knowledge of mortality is both a gift and a curse. It is a gift because it makes life precious, inviting us not to take anything for granted. Knowing that time is limited encourages us to value the present moments and the people around us. Many who have had near-death experiences report having re-evaluated their priorities and goals, placing less weight on material ambitions and more importance on relationships and shared time. For example, the business executive who sacrifices his or her personal life for work may end up asking himself or herself, is it really worth it? Is this what makes me happy? This awareness of the end is also a powerful source of humility. It makes it easier to scale back petty daily worries and superficial desires. Not owning the latest smartphone or not being liked by everyone loses its importance when you recognize that, in the grand scheme of things, living authentically and meaningfully matters more. Furthermore, awareness of mortality teaches us to slow down and enjoy the simple moments, the pleasure of a cool summer breeze, the beauty of a landscape, or the joy of a shared laugh. At the same time, this awareness can be a curse. It is the inevitable end of relationships, projects, and experiences that make life rich and vibrant. Knowing that everything can end at any moment is a frightening reality. Even the healthiest and strongest people are not immune to tragic and unpredictable events. This uncertainty generates anxiety, sometimes latent, which can manifest itself in debilitating ways or lead to a feeling of emotional numbness, a sort of psychological escape to avoid facing this truth. Existential therapy directly addresses this fear, helping to transform the awareness of death into a life-enriching force. Accepting one's end does not mean giving in to fear, but using it as a reminder to live more fully and authentically. It allows you to dedicate yourself to what really matters, to dedicate time and energy to the things and people that give meaning to your existence. Death, paradoxically, can teach us to live optimally. It is the limit that makes every moment unique and unrepeatable. Not knowing how much time you have may seem scary, but it is also a reason to be present and grateful for what you have today. Here, the most important question is not how to avoid death, but how to use awareness of it to live a richer, more conscious, and fuller life. What really matters to you right now? What are you doing today to make your life worth living? Thanks for watching. Goodbye. See you soon.